Game is actually turning the pickups to more of an in-game acquisition. So every time you fight a Cyclops and you rip his eye out, you're actually going to be able to collect that and use that to get rewards.
Help me with these beasts! I have found the secret of Medusa's temple!
This is really showing that idea that Kratos isn't the only one on the island seeking out the Sisters of Fate. There are many heroes throughout mythology that are actually trying to change their own fate. And the enemies that we're bringing back are not just going to be sort of the standard size. We're actually going to be bringing back some of the other larger sized enemies. Now we're all the way back to where we started, and I'm actually able to use the Golden Fleece to throw the Medusa's beam back and turn the door to stone. And that is our little sneak peek into the E3 demo. I want to thank you guys for checking it out. To me, it's from the gut, you know, from the heart, that, yeah, it's going to measure up. I worked on the first game. Half these people worked on the first game, you know? What the first game was a culmination of all these people's work. And this is our blood, sweat, and tears, man. We would never, ever let it fall below what we strove for. We are absolutely not resting until we eclipse the quality of the first games. The response we wanted was what we got out of that press event. Because going into it, I kind of was like, what is the point of this, you know? E3's in 2.5, 3 weeks. Let's just show it E3, you know? But it was good. I see the purpose of it. That's really what game development is. They just keep moving the goal line, you know? Taking the ball away when you're trying to kick it. It's generally the status quo for this job. How you doing? I'm Corey Barlog, director of God of War 2, and what I'm going to do is give you a little tutorial on how to use the mechanics of the game. First thing we're going to show you is the rapidly pressing circle button mechanic. The circle button prompt will come up in the left-hand corner of the screen. You just rapidly press a circle button until you complete the action. Cranks, somewhat misunderstood mechanic sometimes. There's an icon in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. You don't actually have to follow the icon animation, you just follow Kratos' progress on the crank circle. Just make gentle circles following his progress all the way around. The new feature in God of War 2, the grapple, has little icons throughout the world that glow, just like that. And when you approach them, they will radiate, letting you know that you're in range. This means that you can now hit the R1 button, Kratos will throw his blade out, you'll attach to the grapple. If you press the button down and hold it, you'll actually continue your swing. As long as you keep holding it, you'll keep swinging. When you press the X button, you'll release, and you'll be able to continue on to either the next grapple or where you need to go. Another mechanic that we have from the last game is the stick shake mechanic. So when you get frozen by a Medusa or get hit by one of the Griffins, the stick shake icon will appear in the left-hand corner of the screen. And essentially you take the left analog stick and shake it back and forth rapidly until you either shake out or die. The circle button appearing above the creatures basically indicates that you can go and grab the character and enter a CS minigame. These are the stick swoop icons, one of the tougher minigames. All you need to do is just follow the prompt on the screen with the left analog stick and make circles in the shape that the icon is there. Pretty simple, but very difficult sometimes. A new mechanic that we have in God of War 2 is kind of a fishing reel type mechanic. You're gonna throw your blades into characters, and then you make circles with the left analog stick as if you're reeling them in. These are the multi-button CS minigames. So you initiate the minigame, and then follow the button prompts that come on the screen. Hitting the X, hitting the circle, hitting the circle again, until the creature's dead. Another new mechanic we have in God of War 2 is the L1, R1. Essentially, you are alternating from L1 to R1 as if you're shaking something back and forth. These are the Amulet of the Fate statues. When you are not in range, you can't activate the Amulet of the Fates, hitting L1 and pressing R1. But when you go into range, they'll radiate with a circle. And then if you press L1 and then R1, you'll activate the Amulet of Faith, which slows down the world time. Rage of the Titans, activated just like Rage of the Gods in God of War 1. You press the L3 and R3 command, the two analog sticks, press them in. The unique thing about this game is you're able to turn it on and turn it off. And that's it. That is the little tutorial walkthrough for the God of War 2 mechanics.
The description for Kratos was just, we want him to be badass. And that was the direct quote from Dave, you know, that he used the word that a lot, all over. So I knew okay, that's a definite, we need to get that. But at the beginning, we didn't even know if it was gonna be male, female. Some of the sketches were actually a female Kratos, possibly. We're looking for anything that might work. This was just, it doesn't really look like much. It's some kind of alien creature. Or a little bit more comical, big hands, big feet, a flame for his hair. It's almost like holding the weapon like a pool cue. Originally, I was feeling like maybe we need to kind of give him a little soft spot, you know, something that humanizes him. And so that was, we tried the whole baby idea, kind of like the lone wolf and cub, and figured, okay, we can't do a baby because we can't have a baby getting injured or anything like that. So, okay, how about I put a puppy back there, and Dave actually liked that idea at first, but just in terms of implementing it, it would cause a lot more gameplay issues. Eventually, Dave kind of went a different direction with it, and it's like, hey, how about you have to kill the puppy before it turns into Cerebus? I was like, oh, okay. The second stage is we went through a lot of different types of characters. Dave saw this one, he's like, oh yeah, it's capturing the feeling of what he wanted. The next big challenge was, what is he going to be using? You know, because I mean, this is a game, and one of the big things that we need to really push is, how does he fight? At some point, Dave responded to some chains that I'd put on him, and then at some point, I gave him 2 blades. But those 2 elements were never really put together. They're like, okay, we need to hurry up and come up with something. And I think one day I was like, okay, I'll just go off to lunch by myself. I need to think about this. And went to Carl's Jr. I think I still have that sketch somewhere, and it's like a little napkin sketch. That was the first sketch that we started to go towards. Kratos with the double blades, big thick blades, swinging him around with his chains. As an artist, I would like to push him more. As a game artist, where we ended up, I think it works well.
When I first started here, Kratos had the chain blades. The main thing, like the theory behind all of it, was to maintain the fluidity of the change and the fact that there was weight at the end of them, but not cripple the player because of it. Not like you'd have to sit there and wind up and go all over the place. It was actually just like a performance or something, which sounds, you know, but it's not.
The biggest challenge, I guess, would be animating his blades. In the beginning, the rig didn't really support that kind of weapon, so there was an evolution in the way we handle all that. Now the animators are a lot happier. Actually, everything with the rig right now is pretty good. It's pretty easy to animate Kratos compared to the first game.
Kratos was that sort of brutal, no holds barred, just vicious guy. What I was trying to put into it as well was it was sort of the violence, but it also had a bit of the style to it, so that you felt cool playing this guy.
We wanted to keep the player interested, so we can't just do a rehash or recolor of something else. And so we struggled a lot with the powers and also the weapons. And in the first game, we had one sub-weapon, the chains and the sword. And so we knew that we needed to expand upon that.
I really wanted to experience that being cut down to size, that fall from grace, and have the player experience that during play, like actually have to deal with all that, and then take a little bit of their own emotions of losing their powers, their frustration, and then it kind of focuses towards the antagonist of like, fuck that guy, he took my stuff.
He looks more smoothly than the first game. Now, texture is more detailed than the first game. But actually, on technical side, is cheaper than the first game character. This is a model with texture, and we use the green color to do all the transparency.
Initially, it was very hard because the design always asks for a lot of things, and my initial reaction is, no, we can't do that, or you're crazy. The tech group and myself, we kind of just beat our heads against the desks and we figure it out and we do it, and then we actually see it and go, oh wow, we can push Kratos to a higher level.
He has full facial animation ability. We could do fine weighting. All the in-game cinematics are using this model.
We're able to get closer to Kratos during actual gameplay and combat without any of the thing falling apart, which is fantastic. That's a really big thing. He really, I think, goes through a lot. At the end of this one, he's denied again his vengeance, and he finds out something that the extras movies said was already so, but just bummed me out that we said that, so we're pretending that the extras movies aren't 100% there. So all the people out there who are finished the game and have gotten this and have said, oh, what the hell, the extra movie said that Kratos' mom told him that Zeus was his dad. I don't care.
A concept artist takes the descriptions from the director and just the story, and we design all the assets, whether it's a character, environment, a prop, whatever, anything visual in the game. We draw it up, we paint it up, and design what it looks like.
We've got this piece here. It's Kratos versus a Minotaur. This is going to be for another Game Informer. One of the nice parts about working on this image was that I got to kind of redesign the Minotaur a little bit, and had fun with them right here. You can kind of see some of the changes going on here. One of the things that we ran into, because initially I had his head cocked a little bit further over here to his left side, but you don't see his face as well. So this was one of the changes that Corey asked me to do, was try to, cock his head back over a little bit more so we can see his face.
The palace is one of the big locations. It has sort of rounder setting, and as you progress to get to the center, you get sent to the bottom, and then there's dramatic magic released, and then you get to send to the top. I was really excited about the whole concept behind it. One thing that I was able to sell to Corey was having this two monumental statue in the front, so kind of accentuate, actually step into this place, worshiping temple.
The write-up they gave me was that he would create a void, and he's supposed to take his weapon, which in this case was a boomerang, and throw it into the void, and the void would appear near Kratos and strike him. His left arm was supposed to create the void. So I started to take half his body, or one arm would be kind of black, or half his body would be draped in cloth. As I went along, I started thinking about, how about if he threw up this void? So he would just kind of come at you and puke on the floor and create this void. Corey, he wanted it to become more like black smoke. So I started playing around with those themes. This was kind of what he bought off on. I was getting really close. I just had to make some minor changes on it. I really like him the way it's looking, and just at this point, they killed it. Yeah, it's still one of my favorite pieces. It was a nice exercise in development.
What I was told was that this is where the boss fight is going to happen between the Sister 1 and Sister 2 and yourself. And the limitations were on this one that it's opulent, just to bling it out, and it's just really grand. With a couple back and forths, I came up with the final image. It's a lot of detail because basically they need this in order to build. Right in these areas, there's like these blue rectangle things. And I was thinking maybe it's just like a top of a pillar, so it could be, you know, metallic or something. But Ken Feldman, he interpreted it as blue velvet pillows. So he actually modeled like blue velvet pillows in that environment, you know, which is totally fine. You know, it could be seen as a place of worship, so maybe people were to sit on them and stuff like that. But so yeah, seeing their take on your idea, ultimately it's their idea, but you know, our concepts, and seeing it in a 3D form coming alive, that's where like the reward comes from.
All I was really given about the character Oceanus was that he resides in a lake and then comes up out of the lake and starts to wreak havoc on the gods around him. This is what I came up with. Just a lot of variations of the Titan body. The reaction to these was less than stellar. They thought, you know, well, he looks like the other guys, you know, and what are you doing? With the help of my VizDev team, we were able to kind of push it outside of the box and really make some strange, bizarre things. And my team pushed me and told me, let's make this really weird and not worry about how it works. You know, just make it cool. This had a much more favorable reaction, but not there yet. And then he keeps evolving, keeps changing into more of a water creature. The elements that took me to the next steps at this point was to abandon his legs. This is where we finally ended up, which was just this sort of whirlpool of water just shooting up into the sky with his fists and just, you know, exuding power. Unfortunately, after all this work, Oceanus was cut entirely from the game. I hate water now. I really do. I just never liked it, don't swim very well, and this kind of confirms it.
So I'm Stig, art director on God of War 2, and we're going to take a look at some of the lost levels of the game. During the pre-production stages of God of War 2, there was a lot of time spent developing different art concepts, not only on paper, but in 3D. We had a lot of new environment artists start on this project. Almost more than half of the environment team was fresh from other companies, and one of the things that we like to start them with is kind of building these test levels that gave them a chance to learn all the different techniques that we had created on God of War 1. But at the same time, it was good for the whole team because these guys came, you know, they were kind of the rock stars of the companies that they worked at before, and they came here with all sorts of different techniques and methods, which they shared with the rest of the team. That's a big reason why you've seen such a big jump in the graphics between God of War and God of War 2 is because we got all these fresh ideas. The lost levels, they're not only a good proving ground for the artist to prove himself that he understands the tool and the technology, but it's also a good proving ground for the technology in general. Designing something like a Pegasus level is something that's very challenging for an artist. Because we've never done anything like it before. Everything from just the way that we build the geometry at a different level of detail because it's farther away from the camera to little things like the effects. This is kind of the canyon run stuff that we didn't get as much of it or any of it as we wanted to get. Atlantis was going to be an entire world in the game, and we lost that one too. Unfortunately. Maybe it'll come back some other day. This is almost a complete level, pretty much. I mean, we had a lot of everything from the visuals down to all the scripting of the events and explosions, AI placement. It's very sad that it had to get cut. I remember when I heard about it, I was in denial for a few days, but we made our way through it, and we were all very happy with the other levels, so it's nice that it got to make it onto the Lost levels.
Level design is a lot about coming up with the puzzles and the layout and the pacing of an area and coming up with the themes and how they integrate with the story. I worked with Corey to kind of pace it out on paper in a very, very rough form. Corey figured out what he wanted in the script, and then we agreed upon different worlds and kind of the scale of the worlds, what mechanics we wanted to introduce in those worlds, and then set up the layout to facilitate that. On a day-to-day basis, working with all the different level designers to make sure that everything kind of had a consistent feel to it. And then when you jump on it, it's just like a straight elevator ride down. Level design is about planning and like figuring out like, okay, if we want this, then like how are we gonna stage this, and kind of sticking to your guns, but at the same time, having the fluidity to kind of like change gears when you need to, just be like, oh, well, that totally doesn't work, throw it away, you know, and like, you know, start all over again.
Basically have to look at the game from the top down. So we have to say, well, we just had a puzzle here, so let's try to like have a big fight, because it's a little bit more visceral after you just used your brain to, you know, figure out this crazy puzzle that we throw in. So we do that kind of stuff, like just how we want the fights to go, difficulty level of the fight. How we determine how to pace the fights is very much trial and error. We'll spend days on a fight, and then we'll have a play test, and then we can throw all of what we just did out the window. You can tell just by watching them play.
Camera design is basically taking the player and guiding them through the interactive experience. So the camera designer's job is to help the player understand a puzzle, where to go, what he needs to see in order to achieve success in a video game.
Camera in a game like God of War 2 is incredibly important because it basically shows the player everything that he needs to know in order to become a master at the game.
When we're doing like play tests and stuff like that, we're trying to figure out what are these players trying to see.
We try to make sure that we're thinking about, well, what is the player's experience at any point, and what is the player thinking about, and so we show that.
The basic viewpoint is that we're trying to stay behind Kratos, and we're trying to lead the player in the proper direction. We change it up when you get into an arena and you do some combat and stuff like that. Generally, you don't necessarily need to be behind Kratos at that point of view. You want to see all the enemies.